the presentation of I Was There, Unknown Stories of Vietnam, and the moving wall is coming in the city of Lockport. Whereas 6 distinguished Vietnam veterans, each representing extraordinary service to our nation and continued dedication to their community, have graciously agreed to share their firsthand experiences during the Vietnam Veterans Roundtable, providing an opportunity for future generations to hear history directly from those who lived it. Whereas each of those veterans answered our nation's call during one of the most challenging periods in American history and has continued to serve those communities with honor, integrity, and distinction. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, John Lombardi, Mayor of the City of Lockport, do hereby proclaim our deepest gratitude and appreciation to Vietnam Veterans of America, Chapter 268, and to Thomas Beilein, Stephen Banko, David Godfrey, Walter Moxham, Don Coates, and Don McSwann for their military service, their enduring commitment to preserving history, and their willingness to share their stories so that future generations may better understand the sacrifices by those who have served during the Vietnam War. Thank you and God bless.
For all that you do and all the support that you have given us for this exhibit. And at this point, I'd like to invite Niagara County Legislator Rick Abbott to join me here. He has a special presentation for each of our panelists today. Rick?
On behalf of the Niagara County Legislature, the Kenan Center, Lockport Public Arts Council, especially Mary Brennan Taylor and Ellen Martin, and all the veterans who are in attendance today, and especially to these gentlemen for participating in what we're about to do. So we have a small token of gratitude in regards to a 250th anniversary commemorative coin I would like to present to each one of our participants at this moment. Thank you.
Niagara Falls and called to active duty for Vietnam in 1968. Norm was active in veteran organizations, the military, and the fire service all his life. 73 years in the Gasport Fire Company, and he was still active. He had a recent health issue, but seemed to be recovering okay. He was able to attend the grand opening here and the nurses' roundtable. Unfortunately, a week later, he fell, hit his head, and never recovered. Norm was 90. He will be greatly missed by this organization and everyone who knew him. The viewing for Norm is this Thursday from 4 to 7 p.m. at the Gasport Chemical Hose Company, and the funeral service is the following day at 10 a.m. also at the Gasport Fire Company. He will be buried at the National Cemetery with a private service. Thank you, and I'll turn this back to Mary.
Panel. I'm going to go from left to right and begin with Don Coates. Don served in Vietnam from 1967 to 68 during the height of the Tet Offensive. Mr. Coates served as base air security police, a duty that found him under enemy rocket and mortar attack. On one occasion, over 2,000 Viet Cong attacked the base in an attempt to destroy aircraft, at which time Mr. Coates was able to rescue an injured airman and capture the Viet Cong. Following his military service, Mr. Coates graduated from Buffalo State Teachers College with a degree in elementary education and history. In addition to teaching, he was employed by General Motors until retirement. Next to Mr. Coates is Wheatfield Supervisor Don McSwann. Wheatfield Supervisor McSwann began his Vietnam service in 1967 as a combat medic with the Army's 9th Infantry Division. In the midst of the Tet Offensive, Mr. McSwann's platoon suffered a 90% casualty rate. Mr. McSwann is recipient of 2 Purple Hearts, a Bronze Star, and Air Medal for completing 82 helicopter combat missions and Army Commendation Medal. A frequent speaker on his experience as a combat veteran, Mr. McSwann is author of the book, Doc, A Combat Medic's Story. And next to Mr. McSwann, Steve Banko. Steve Banko III is considered the most decorated Vietnam veteran in Western New York, who served for 16 months as an infantry squad leader in the 1st Infantry and 1st Cavalry Divisions. Wounded 6 times, he was decorated for heroism and awarded multiple Silver Stars, Bronze Stars, and Purple Hearts for his actions in combat. Mr. Banko has written extensively about his experiences in Vietnam and is the author of For No Good Reason, which he actually has here for purchase and will sign the books for the audience. The former field office director of the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, Mr. Banko spent over 20 years in state and local government. And next to Mr. Phuc Vinh. Following his military service, Mr. Moxham attended and graduated from the University of Buffalo Law School. He was admitted to the New York State Bar in 1974 and has been a partner in the firm Moxham from 75 to the present. Mr. Moxham is an original founding member of the Vietnam Veterans of America. What was your life like before Vietnam?
Well, as was indicated a few minutes ago, I graduated from the University of Notre Dame in 1968, and I had come home that previous April, I think, and I went to the Selective Service Office here in Lockport, and it indicated to the nice lady that took care of me that I was graduating soon, and I was planning to go to law school. I'd been accepted at law school already. And she pulls my name out of a record somewhere, and she kind of smiles and says, well, she says, I wouldn't be planning to go anywhere real soon. She says, you're going to get notice pretty soon to go downtown Buffalo and have a physical. And sure enough, I went back, graduated that June, and a couple of weeks later, I got a nice letter saying, come on downtown. We want you to have a physical. Took my physical. And of course, next thing you knew, in October of that year, I was back in Buffalo on my way then to Fort Dix.
Thank you. Tom?
I guess it was pretty much like any other teenager today, and that's all I was. I was thinking when I read these questions that what was my life like before Vietnam? I was only 17 when I enlisted in the Army. And so I was pretty, just out of high school. I graduated from high school in June. And by that September, I was on my way to Fort Dix. But it was, running around the fields in New Fane, in the orchards, playing high school football, doing everything that, a young man, very young person today may be doing. And I felt I was supposed to go to college. I was a little bit hesitant because I didn't really want to go back to school, and ended up in a recruiter office in the old post office right here in Lockport. And within a short time after that, like Wally said, we were both on our way to Fort Dix.
So I'll get into a good trade. I went to NCCC and started to take the courses there. And I said, come on, it's got to be more than this. So I started thinking about the service. So I talked to a few of the recruiters, and the Marine Corps decided that they could find a good place for me. Good credentials for an electrician. They said they even have computers that we make you, work on the computers. So I did volunteer for the Marines, and off I went to Parris Island in the middle of December. It was quite exciting. And if you want to know what boot camp really looks like at Parris Island, look at Full Metal Jacket, because that crew actually went to Parris Island just about the same time here that I did, and then was deployed to Vietnam to a headquarters compound, which I wound up actually going to. So that movie kind of followed my path.
Very interesting. That's great. Steve, how about you?
Well, when I graduated from high school at Timon in South Buffalo, I thought my life was all laid out for me. I had a basketball scholarship to UD. I was one of 8 kids, and that was the only way I was going to go to college. But shortly after that, a lot of that self-confidence I had turned into hubris, and I left UB, walked away from the scholarship, went to St. Bonaventure on my own dime for a year. Got kicked out of St. Bonaventure because I failed ROTC. I showed them, and then I got drafted. And I wasn't, things were not looking up for me at that point. Like, my life had been really pretty easy up to that point, and then I kind of started to slide. So when I went to Vietnam, when they sent me to Vietnam, I was sent to a place where failure was no longer an option.
Thank you, Steve.
And came back well pictured. So ROTC was wrong.
Well, that was the way that the federal government paid the private colleges in those days. I gave them aid. So I messed up the bottom line in a Catholic school.
Than any other young man, I would involved with sports, track, football, and Hyder Wheatfield School. But one thing that I love doing, and it's funny, my neighbor next door worked in the air base, and he always had these wooden gun stocks, and he had rafts in his backyard. So we played guns. And I know that sounds crazy, but playing guns, although it was ketchup instead of blood, we played guns almost all summer long. And it was, he had this huge rubber raft that we would get shot and roll off into the water and then get back in, and you get another life. But I think playing guns as a kid really prepared me for combat in a lot of ways. And I remember looking at some of the city boys that didn't react as quickly as the country boys that played guns. One of the things I noticed as a medic.
Interesting. Thank you. Don, how about you?
Well, I'm one of eight. I was born in Hornell, New York. And back in the 50s and 60s was a good time to be young, get your job done at home, and away you go. And there was no limitation. Nobody bothered you. We just were free to do what we wanted to do. And on here, we play war all the time. We dug our own little foxholes and jumped into it. And the whole thing. So, in high school, I worked for the school, signed up for the Air Force, and the way I went to Latin, day after my birthday. So that's always easy to remember certain dates,
Yeah, absolutely.
and along the way, the week before, I met my future wife.
Oh, boy, you had a full load
And I had
there.
everything going. Yeah.
So tell me, what was it like arriving in Vietnam, Don? Just
Well, my wife and I talked about this. The aircraft that brought us circled the base. I was at Bien Hoa, which is just up above Saigon. Circled the base and said, everybody seatbelt on, we're going down. Because if we don't, we're gonna get shot at. And we went from altitude to ground, just like that. Then you go, they open the door for you. And you walk right out the door, and the first thing you do is it felt like a wet blanket hit you because of the humidity, and the smells were different than we have here in the United States. It was you had to get acclimated to what was going on. So
It was F-4 escorting us to the base, and the pilot came out and said, these aircraft are designed to make a steep descent. Be prepared, buckle up, and that it dropped fast. And I thought we're going to die right here. But they did a steep descent, pulled up and landed, and it was Christmas Eve when we landed. And I think the first thing that hit me was the heat. And then the second thing, there was USO girls at the end of the ramps passing, and they had like Santa Claus hats on. And I know they were trying to make us feel good, but not so good. And they were handing out like handkerchiefs and things like that for the vets. But that was Christmas Eve.
thanks. How about you, Steve?
Well, they weren't flying strictly military planes. We flew on a civilian plane, and the flight attendants were very sweet to us. But we were getting off the plane, and the one woman was standing in the door, and she kept telling everybody, good luck, God bless you, good luck, and she got to me. And I saw the look on her face, and I said, don't worry, it's not going to be that bad. And she held my hand for a minute. She said, yes, it will. And I should have stayed. We should have just went back and sat down because she was right. She was exactly right. But I arrived just in time for Tet. I got to Vietnam on January 20th, and I think Tet started on January 30th. And my first gunshot wound was on February 12th. So welcome to Vietnam.
Right, exactly. Oh my gosh.
Well, we left the States, and halfway point was Alaska, Fairbanks, stopping to fuel up. And of course, like Don said, I did Vietnam and opened that door. It was entirely different to Vietnam and Alaska. But as we descended, there wasn't any lights, wasn't a thing anywhere. And I'm looking for some sort of ground or anything. There was nothing there. Little did I realize we're coming in over the South China Sea. We landed in Da Nang, which is right there next to the sea. Well, as we approached the shoreline, like that guy said, hang on, we got to make a hard right.
And it was a hard ride. That aircraft went sideways. Came like that, it was pitch dark, then all of a sudden there's the lights we didn't run. It was that quick.
Wow. I just feel my stomach dropping thinking about those sudden descents.
15 minutes later, he handed me an airport to run 16.
There you go.
Welcome to Vietnam.
Over, I had been in Germany. I'd been in Bamberg, Germany, stationed with an artillery unit in Germany and got transferred out there to Vietnam. And I got transferred with one of my friends, John Leonard. And of course, when we came back, it was like Christmas time, and we had a couple days leave before we left for Vietnam. And we flew over, we didn't fly on the same planes together. But I remember the flight from San Francisco or Oakland to Hawaii. We landed in Hawaii, and everybody on the plane was a soldier. They all stood up, and nobody's getting off here. They had MPs at the door that you weren't going to get off the plane. Okay, and the next took off from there, and the next stop was at Guam. Well, there was no MPs. And there was nobody, and they said, you can get off here and walk around. There's no place to go once you get here. It's a 3 square mile island. But then I remember very distinctly landing in Tantanute Airport, Air Force Base, just outside of Saigon. And it was very dark and very early in the morning, and we had the same descent. I think it was standard procedure that you just dive bomb a aircraft into the runway. And as soon as I got out, the same thing hit me was the heat hit you first, and then the smell of a mixture of fish oil, fuel oil, and burning latrines was what hit you right, the smell at first, and then sitting in a parking lot waiting for a bus to take us to the reception center, watching the S4s take off from Tantanute. But the interesting thing is, like I say, my friend Dan Leonard and I didn't go over together, but we met each other at the replacement center. And we walked up to get our assignments, and the young man there said, you guys know each other, you friends? We said, yeah, you want to go to the same unit? Because you're not scheduled to. And we looked at each other and we said, let's not mess with Mother Nature. And Don stayed down, went to the 1st Infantry Division. I went up to the 1st Cavalry Division. And I met him years later at Fort Knox Army Hospital. And just about his entire platoon was
Shot down.
shot up during a skirmish. And so the decision to go our own separate ways favored me. Much more than it favored Dan.
Like commercial plane back. I left Travis. My first stop was Honolulu, Hawaii. Someone indicated that there were guards at every exit. They wanted to make sure no one was going to leave and spend a couple of weeks having fun in Hawaii. And then we landed finally at Travis Air Force Base. And the hours later, the same thing. It's blasting heat, hot, muggy, an odor of some sort. It's hard to identify. And then they load you on a bus because we had to then go to another base to fly out of. And you got on the bus, and all the windows were covered with some kind of a wire fencing so that no one could throw grenades in or anything. And I always remember that ride. Bumpy, smelly, muggy.
It might seem silly, but everybody was in uniform when they traveled, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, gotcha.
I would have to say the colonel was in charge of this. He was kind of a night owl. He would come out. I was on the midnight shift from 10 o'clock to 6 o'clock in the morning. So it was always dark. And he liked to come out and just see what was going on. But many times he did that. He would sit down and talk with me, and we discussed different things and so forth. And he gave me an opportunity to go up in a big water tower to observe rockets as they were fired, so I could get them down to control so they could start the siren. And with the people in the bunkers. It was different. Colonel was really nice. For being an officer, he was on the same as
I think there's gonna be more officer stories here. How about you, Don?
Landed there. I don't think anybody that wasn't somewhat afraid of what was coming. And I remember he took me under his wing and assisted me, guided me, especially we got into near combat situations. And I won't go long stories, but we had a situation where we got ambushed, and there was men laying in the field, and there was some screaming for a medic. And Sergeant Williams grabbed, and I was young, and somebody screamed medic, I was going to go out and help. And I'll never forget, he grabbed me by the scuff of the neck, and I won't swear, but he said, "You're no effing good me dead." And he pulled me down, and I realized if I got on the field, I would have probably gotten it too. So, but he kept his eye on me and guided me through, and for most of the time, but he was killed with 10 days notice.
I had to tell guys in my squad, if you got a hangnail, don't yell for the medic, because these guys respond no matter what. And make sure you're really hurt. The guy who stuck out in my mind, and of course, it's somebody that I can't forget even if I wanted to. On 3 December 1968, my company was ambushed by a big, what they call in the service, numerically superior enemy force. And I have no idea how many of them there were. But they did a job on us. And the guy who saved my life that day, like literally saved my life, was a guy named John Holcomb. And he died saving me and got the Medal of Honor posthumously. And when I was in the hospital, I was able to write part of the citation for his medal. And then I was in contact with his father for several months until the father passed away. But I'm here because of him. So that's a debt I can't ever repay.
Looked at that question, so many names went through my mind. And certainly they all were brothers in the same thicket as we were. But all of a sudden, two names came to mind. Sergeant Kim and Sergeant Chun. They were ROK Marines, South Korea. And we kind of shared the same bunk area with them. But I tell you, those two gentlemen were always there. They would cover your back. They would never, ever leave you. We were assigned the same machine gun bunker on the wire, Sergeant Chun. And the moments that we were there sometime was dead silent. I can't describe it, but with everything going on, there was really dead silence. But I could turn to him. He put his hand on my arm. He said, "We'll make it." So when I think of all of my brothers, those two ROK Marines come to mind. They made it, helped me get through.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Company commander, Captain Anthony Zuko. And I mean, a company commander that cared. That didn't, wasn't looking out for himself or his own career. He would always come up to us and say, "How are you doing? You doing all right?" And no matter what the situation was, you could depend on him making the right decisions for his unit, for his men. And I think that over the course of my lifetime, it taught me a lot about leadership and about caring about the people you lead and asking, looking them right in the eye and say, "How are you doing?" I can remember many nights that meant a lot to me. That Captain Zuko would actually rather to come and say to a private first class, "How are you doing?" Now,
Yeah, that's a really good point about leadership. You're absolutely right.
That question, and honestly, it's difficult to say I had any lasting impression from anybody that I was involved with. Captain Cortez, I remember him, actually, he was a West Point guy who had, I think he'd grown up in Lewiston. Um, to be honest with you, I tried to get out of the unit I was in. It was a headquarters company, very, boring, not really doing anything. So I spoke to him. I told him I wanted to try to get transferred out. I wanted to go to what I thought was a pacification program in unit where I could be out in the field and deal with Vietnamese people. I didn't really know much about it, but I thought I was more suited to do that than doing, being on a tower all night or a bunker all night and that sort of thing. And he helped me put together a letter, and we sent it out, and I sent it. You got to go up the chain of command. You got to get rejected, and you got to go up to the next step, and we did that. Took probably 5 or 6 months before I got a response. I even went so far as to send a letter to Henry Smith, who was our congressman at the time, explaining that my situation, I thought I would be better suited to be in a pacification program. He wrote me a very nice letter back. He said, I'll look into it and I'll get back to you. And about, a month later, I get a letter from the 1st Cavalry higher up unit telling me that they just didn't have room for me to leave. And then Henry, to his credit, sent me a nice letter saying, I apologize. We tried to get you out of that unit, but at this point in time, you're stuck with it. Claymore mines were out in front and that sort of thing. The Viet Cong had made their way through some of the wire out in front, and they were right in front of us. That was a very scary night for all of us around there.
Sounds like it.
And at the end of it all, we were able to repel them, and they found 7 or 8 bodies the next morning right out in front of us.
Wow. Tom, how about you?
I would have to say I was in 1966. I think everybody sitting at this table would say to you, everybody has a different experience by what time, what era they were in Vietnam, whether it was 66, 68, 70. But in 1966, I was in Pleiku. And my father had suffered a heart attack here at home. And I had been in Vietnam for 11 months. And our home base was back in Han Cay, but somehow they got a hold of my Captain Zuko again and said we were taking him out of here, we're flying him home. And I said, that's fine, and they said, we need to get on, go to the air base, show these orders, and they'll put you on a C-123, which is a small cargo plane. Very small. And I got loaded on that plane to fly to the coast. And I was the only one sitting in the cargo hold, except for there was pallets of body bags strapped into the center of the airplane. And for all practical purposes, I was the only beating heart in the back of that airplane that flew to the coast and to get on the plane out. That's the moment that I live with.
I guess my story is 2-part. I'll shorten it up. Not that we took rockets. We got here at Long Beach Hospital. And coming in receiving, there was just all sorts of action going on. I looked out what it was. A small convoy hit a landmine and through a diesel truck. And these men came in and their skin just looked like the desert, just charred right off. And it stuck in me. But let me change the other side of the story. Because that time I was moving up, couldn't write. And it was 6 weeks when my wife did get a letter. Take longer than that. But during that time, they were having dinner. I had a 6-month-old child. She lived at home with her parents at the time. They were having dinner. They know about it. But Julie said, I'll go get her. When she sat down in the breezeway, and there's a gentleman in full uniform. Can you imagine? Not having a word from me several weeks. And she said, at that point in time, she said, she lost it. She said, if I didn't have so much faith in God to know that you were alive, I don't know what I would have done. So when I think of my part over there, that time that was bad in my tour, I can also think of her. So people left behind at home had the same war as we did. You know,
I came home in 1970, and I was a stone alcoholic till 82. And my wife said, I put up with you for 12 years, I'm not going to do it for 13. So she got me sober. And I just want to say that all of the spouses, the sisters, the mothers, all of you might be in the audience. I know you had nurses previously, which was a great term on your part. But the people who stayed behind not only suffered with us, they helped us get over the suffering as well. Well, my day, this December 3rd of 68, I got shot the first time at 10 in the morning. I got shot and the bullet broke my leg. And the second bullet hit me at 2:30 in the afternoon in the same leg and hit me in the knee and cost me my kneecap. They sent me back to a hospital in Saigon, which I had never been in before. All the nurses were dressed in white. You know, they looked like a real hospital. You know, wow, what's going on here? And they brought me into the into triage, and they said, look, we're going to take the bullets out, but there's so many guys behind you. We can't wait for the anesthetic to kick in. So he said, we're just going to yank it. And I had some morphine in the field. The medics had hit me with a couple. And I thought, yeah, they'll be all right. Well, after I threw up on his shoes, he said, where are you from? And I said, and I was wiping my mouth. I said, from New York. He said, New York City? And I said, no. Damn it, there's more than that. And I said, Buffalo. He said, really, what part of Buffalo do you live in? I said, I'm right near South Park High School in South Buffalo. He said, my office is on Casanova Street. He got drafted. The Carl Day, his name was. He was the fire department doctor and also the steel plant doctor. And so he came, I was only in his care for a couple of days, but he came in to see me every day, and it was sort of like there's a connection, there is a world after this, that he came from it. And that really, my mindset, we lost 86% of my rifle company in that ambush, and I was in a bad place, but he made it a little bit better just by knowing that, you know, there's somebody from the old area.
That's great.
I'm not going to make it lengthy, but I remember we were on training missions before Tet. If anybody got there before Tet, it was quiet. And there was a black gentleman who was traveling with me. We got sniped all day long. And I remember hitting the ground, but nothing was near us, and we were kind of just goofing around. And I remember looking at him and saying, "That's not so bad." And I'll never forget the look that he gave me. He said, "Doc, you ain't seen shit." And it was the next day we got ambushed. But the one defining moment, and I won't make it lengthy, I'll keep it short. Our platoon sergeant got a watch for his anniversary. And it was if anybody remembers the Twist-a-Flex bands, in order to shorten it, you had to take links out of it. Well, he didn't have the time to go out in the field. And we were walking into a village, and it was a search and destroy mission. But this village had wire running from hooch to hooch, and they had enough rice to feed a battalion of Viet Cong, so we knew that Viet Cong had been there. And we walked into a hooch, and if you guys remember this, but many of the hooches had bunkers inside. And these bunkers inside had a false wall, so if something didn't land next to it, the artillery would hit that inside wall, wouldn't hurt anybody. So we walked into this hooch, and the Mamazan was acting very, very nervous. And our sergeant threatened to throw a grenade in the bunker. And she got down and grabbing him by the ankles. No, 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 no. And he kept yelling for someone to come out of the bunker, and they didn't. So he took a grenade and threw it in the bunker. And what it did, it blew a hole out the back of the bunker. And this young man, age, it was very hard to guess age, but I'm going to say maybe a teenager, ran out of the back of the bunker. And our sergeant went after him and tackled him into a stream. It was the monsoon season, so the water was really... Well, the kid was terrified, and he scratched Capretta in the face. And Capretta took and swung at the kid, and his watch flew off into the water. So he took his gun out and shot the kid 8 times. But the part that got me is when he looked up and said, pardon my French, you believe I lost my fucking watch? But the sad part is, and it's like, here, I'm a Christian. And I remember people looking and other guys saying, you lost your watch, man. And here's a mother holding her dead son. So it kind of made you realize how you changed without even realizing it. And I think everybody here can, by being in combat, you just change. It's just one of those things. And you become jaded to death, and you get jaded to shooting. It just became not a way of life, but you had to, especially as a medic, be jaded to those kind of things. But that was a real moment that stuck with me forever, still does.
The 84, the bases were being hit. So they went for the Air Force. They went on red alert. I don't know if you guys went on red alert. What they did is they took our unit, split it in half to 12-hour shifts. Day shift and night shift. I was on the night shift. And my job that day was being in a Jeep. We call it a SAT, Sabotage Alert Team. I don't know if you guys had anything like that. We would cover the base in case somebody was in action. We had extra ammo. I have an M60 gunner. And we'd go in and hopefully block a hole in something as the VC came through. That night at 3 o'clock in the morning, all hell broke loose. I was at Beilein, with the railway station. The city erupted in rockets. There were 3 of us. There was 3 men in our Jeep. That was from the SAT team. And you see these rockets, and you look over to the left, where they closer to the city. You look at the base, and it's blowing up. Aircraft are blowing up. There's all kinds of. Their bullets are different than ours. I don't know if you can ask it. I remember green bullets going everywhere. And we were coming back to where the VC actually did a flanking movement to draw all the security police over that area, left the main gate wide open. There was 4 of us, the gate guard and the 3 of us in the SAT team. The major offensive or effect that they wanted to do is come through the main gate, kill us, cross the street with a helicopter. They were going to destroy the helicopter. Then they were going to get into any moving vehicle, go throughout the base, and just kill any airmen they saw. But the airmen were unarmed. We were security. We had the M60s, the grenades, and whatever stuff. So they never came through. And finally, I learned we came to a fork in the road, made a left instead of a right. I ended up downtown. Had a big battle, and actually, if they had come through the main gate, there would have been nothing to stop them from destroying the place.
Wow.
That was scary.
Well, I'm gonna move on.
The airplane was supposed to fly me home. Didn't. I laughed and said, anybody going to Buffalo, take a look at that plane, where'd you come? I said, that heartwarming. And the girl that I had met before I went to Vietnam was waiting for me at Buffalo. I never got into 3 o'clock in the morning. She had gone home. But she had met my dad and my brother. 2 weeks later, when we got together, we were engaged. So for 3 years span, nothing, just letters. And met her 2 weeks later. I got home and he got We got engaged and we've been married 57 years. She is incredible. She looked at me going, "Oh, yes."
That's wonderful. That's a great story. Don, can you tell us?
Don.
Yeah. You're
The other
the other
guy,
Don, Donna. What was it like coming home from Vietnam?
You know, as excited as I was to get home, we were greeted horribly. And, you know, you're really proud because you served as a veteran, and I was proud of what we did our jobs, but we were treated horribly. And our first night we spent in a warehouse that was so hot, and they had beds, I mean, there was hundreds of beds. I don't know if you guys had the same thing. And they put us in there, and it was just almost like, and there was a group of youth standing outside the fence, calling all these different names and throwing things. So it was not what we expected. And so I was very disheartened to see the way we were treated. Some of the guys wanted to strip their uniforms off and pay full price to get back home rather than fly with the uniform on. But I don't think any of us realized at the time coming back from Vietnam how we were going to be treated. We thought we'd be treated with respect, and it was the total opposite.
Thank you. Steve?
well, the first time I came home, I was on crutches. I was, after Vietnam, they sent me to Japan. They sent me to Fitzsimmons Army Hospital. I was going to have my leg amputated. But the guy said, I think I got a friend at Walter Reed. He can fix it. So they sent me to Walter Reed. And then I was recuperating at Fort Devens in Massachusetts. So I was going home for the first time out of Logan Airport in Boston. And I was going through the bus station, and a young girl spit at me. Didn't quite hit me. And then I thought, well, after I went back to Vietnam and I was coming home the second time, I thought, well, this is going to be better. And I enrolled at UB. I think I came home on a Thursday night, and I started class on Tuesday. And when everybody in my neighborhood wanted to be Superman, I wanted to be Clark Kent. I had the idea I wanted to be a reporter. And so UB didn't have a journalism program at the time, so I majored in English. And I was in a creative writing class, and this professor said, give me 750 words on anything you want to write about. So I hadn't been home from Vietnam for about a week, and I wrote a story about Vietnam. So when he gave the papers back, he called me up in front of the class, and he said, look, if this is real, if you were in Vietnam. And I said, well, I thought the tan and the short hair might have given me a lift in 1970. He said, I suggest you drop this class. I'll never give a passing grade to anybody who fought in that. And so I went to see, and I knew all the administrators because of my previous encounters with the scholarship. And I went to see one of the guys, and he said, don't worry, I'll get you in another class. Same night, you won't miss a beat. And I said, well, what about this asshole? He said, the assholes are in charge. So that was welcome home.
Dave? How was your
Well, actually, the Marine Corps flew us into Marine Corps base in San Diego. I was being discharged in '68. So I was in the process of being discharged. So we got on the base, and there was obviously a waiting time. It was like 4 or 5 days. And some of them were going to leave the base, and I said, no, I got military around me, and I'm not going anywhere. And I stayed on that base. And there was, I think, 6 or 7 of us on the flight. We flew into Knox Falls Air Base. And I knew that ahead, and I told Julie, I said, park in the parking lot. Do not come in the terminal. Just stay up there, because I've heard all this stuff. It's exactly the way we were treated. As soon as we got anywhere near people away from that gate, and throw things at you, I got spit at several times. Even once I got out into the parking area. was not pretty. And I was ashamed of my fellow Americans if they had done that. But I do want to say, over the years and the generations that have come since, thank you for recognizing the sacrifice that we have given. Because now, like this today, I'm proud to say I did serve my country. And I thank people here in the United States who now realizing how great the sacrifice our families gave along those times.
Tom, you want to share something?
Like I said, I came back a little unusual because I never even had a chance to transition out of the clothes on my back. I didn't play cool when they put me on an airplane to fly to the coast. So I actually landed in the United States with the same clothes on that I was wearing 24 hours earlier to play cool. And I remember walking into my house and my mother wanting to take that off and burn it. It stinks. Everything about it stinks, but that's a side story. I went, like I say, 66, and coming back in 66 was probably different than coming back in 68 and coming back in 70. There was still a modest amount of respect for the servicemen who were there. But after coming back, I got reassigned to Fort Knox, Kentucky. And one of the duties that I had was going throughout Appalachia and being an honor guard for the funerals of fallen soldiers coming back. And I think everybody here that is conscious and awake carries a guilty feeling about them when they go to the wall and when they see the wall. We all have that inherent guilt in us. And I think going and doing, you walk to, and you're talking Appalachia, you're talking the spring and it's cold and it's wet. And there would be a graveside service, and then they'd want the honor guard to come to the church. And you kept thinking the people are staring at you and saying, why is he here? And my son is not. So, I started with that for a good number of years, but between my family, I'm one of 9 children. I know we have a couple of 1 of 8s here. So I hold the record at 1 of 9. My family and my fiance and future wife, Lindy, who's here after 50 some years too. No wonder. Managed to get over the hump of coming back and saying, there's more to life than what has happened, and we need to move on and live your life. I let go of guilt, and it's still hard. I mean, everybody, the first time I went to the wall, the tears just wouldn't stop. That was what it was like coming home for me.
Wally?
So I had extended for 2 extra months so I could get out of the Army and be able to go back to law school at the University of Buffalo. So when we flew into Travis and then went down to Oakland Army base where they filed the paperwork and that sort of thing was settled up, and whatever money they paid you, I guess they gave us money at that point. And so it's like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Fortunately, a friend of mine from Notre Dame picked me up. I was able to call in and pick me up, and we went over. And I was going to stay in California for 2 or 3 days to just kind of readjust. And so that next day or a couple of days later, I kind of wandered around Oakland. He was in Oakland, and some of the colleges were there. And I wandered around there, and of course there were protests all over the place. And fortunately, no one's spit on me, no one, gave me a hard time, but I certainly felt, out of place. Berkeley at that point was a hotbed of rebellion and against the war. And even when my dad picked me up 3 or 4 days later, nobody in my family even wanted to talk about it. I mean, because I didn't want to talk about it either. But nobody asked me any questions. Nobody, asked me. They just knew I was going to go to law school and get back into the swing of things. Went back to a construction job for the summer. And honestly, no one said words. It was like I wasn't even there.
Well, gentlemen, I am sorry, but our time has come to an end. And I still have like a whole nother half page of questions. However, I will take the opportunity to speak with some of you over at our reception that will take place right after.